День, уважаемые коллеги, только что закончилось подписание соглашения в рамках открытия. Прошу несколько минуток
Dear colleagues, I'm waiting for several more minutes of patience. They've just finished signing the document, and we'll begin our session of the plenary meeting. Big city.
Уважаемые коллеги, прошу прощения за небольшую задержку, но очень плотный.
Distinguished colleagues, sorry for a small delay, but we have quite a dense program of 2 events, Baltic City and Big City Ecology. Events take place one after the other. It's for the second time that we gathered in St. Petersburg at the forum Big City Ecology. Let me remind that initially it was focused mainly at the city utensils and the city service equipment for collection and disposal of waste was meant. But since then, the event was handed over to the Committee on Nature Use and Environment Protection. So this became a site for cooperation and socialization between the entities of Russia that are dealing with the issue. Gradually, this forum became international. More and more participants joined us till the pandemic started, when, alas, there was quite a limited opportunity for meeting. During the pandemic, there wasn't a great chance to meet in person. After the pandemic, we restored this event, and basing on that experience, we keep holding our event. I'm happy to say that more than 2,500 participants of the forum registered this year. Many are joining us using via internet. This tripled our audience previously. Before the pandemic, we had from 4,000 to 5,000 people. Last year, there were over 7,000. Hope this year the audience will be no less than that. After this short introduction, I'd like to start the solemn part, brief greetings. So let me invite to give the floor to the representative of Madam Matvienko, the chair of the Council of Federation. It will be read out by Alexander Dvainecha from the Committee on Nature Use.
Добрый день, уважаемые товарищи.
Good day, dear comrades.
Председателя Совета Федерации.
The greeting from the chair of the Council of Federation, Madam Matvienko. On behalf of the Federation Council and the Federal Assembly of Russia, and from me personally, I'm greeting the participants of the 22nd International Forum, Big City Ecology. Environment protection is a need for the future well-being of humans. International cooperation in this field is of vital importance. It will enable to preserve the water areas, to cut down the amount of contaminants in the air. The topic is still accurate, disregarding the difficult situation in the world. Environmental safety is a priority, and it's mentioned in the national development goals that are coordinated with the Sustainable Development Goals and the strategy of development of Russia till the year 2025. There's also the national project Ecology. Digital transformation shall enable us to get to the status of digital maturity. Well, we introduce everything best available technology, and we are aimed at a transfer to the closed-circuit economy or closed-cycle economy. Internal ecology tourism is getting important, including that in the protected area. Russia has great prospects for that, but when forming the tourist infrastructure, it's necessary to take care of nature. I'm sure that this forum shall enable to discuss the most topical issues regarding environment protection and shall enable the development of practical solutions. All the best in your work, Valentina Matvienko. Dear colleagues, let me also briefly tell you about the approaches of the Profile Committee of the Council of Federation in the field of legislation. In the ecology of big cities is quite a topical issue. At the opening, it was mentioned that the number of citizens in big cities keeps growing. It's a global trend, hence we have challenges, big challenges. And everybody wants clean environment in those big cities and good places for recreation and rest nearby. Thus, we need to discuss best practices, understand the challenges, and together with the Duma deputies, we are working on a number of big draft laws related to this topic. That's the boundaries of protected areas and the cleaning of the water areas mentioned by the President. We also think about using the protected areas for recreation. There's a federal initiative prepared by deputies and senators for development of parks in the forests, and we are tracking quite attentively the condition of the air and of the water. Valentina Matvienko mentioned digitalization of these processes. That means we can bring this work to a new level. Nowadays, we have serious challenges. Thus, I wish the speakers and participants successful work. Our committee is quite attentive about the things developed at this site. Many of the speakers are members of the expert council of our committee. Thus, together with the colleagues, I want you to master all the suggestions and initiatives. Once again, I wish you every success, and I thank the government administration of St. Petersburg for organizing these forums. It's important nowadays, especially now under the international limitations in such conditions. And we should search for local technologies and implement them successfully. All the best.
Спасибо, Александр Владимирович.
Thank you, Alexander. Let me use the opportunity and thank on behalf of the committee. A lot of our initiative wouldn't get the development in the legislative authorities, but for you. Same about the water code. Yeah, regarding the water code, there was a lot of your initiatives that assisted us and thus the whole country, finally. And today's agreement is also quite a product. Now the
Никогда этого не добился.
local authorities can spend money on the federal objects. We would never get there without your support. Well, definitely, the NGOs play a very important role in forming of the ecology agenda. Now, greetings from Vyacheslav Fetisov, the chair of the All Russia Society for Nature Protection. He is the goodwill envoy at the UN, so he is welcome to provide his greetings.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги.
Good day, dear colleagues, dear friends. Let me greet the participants, guests, and organizers of the 22nd International Forum Big City Ecology. For quite a number of years, this forum is one of the main sites in the northwest of Russia for a dialogue of NGOs, authorities, and business. This forum is good for improvement of cooperation between the Russia's entities. It's a large-scale modern work that is important for the development of everything related with nature protection in the country. Rational use of natural resources, bringing down the human impact on the environment is the priority of the government policy in the field of environment in Russia. The President of Russia, in his message to the Federal Council this year, has mentioned the importance of environment especially. He underlined the importance of water areas and the importance of preservation of unique water ecosystems. In St. Petersburg, there took place the signing of the agreement on cooperation between the related authorities. Ladoga, Onega regions, Kaliningrad region, that's all important for preservation of the Baltic Sea. A green sustainable vector of development. That's the requirement of modern times and is necessary for improvement of people's well-being. The organizers made it a very interesting place and exhibition. I'm sure that the presentations shall be very useful and shall improve the environmental security in our country. I'd like to thank the citizens of St. Petersburg for the active participation in different initiatives, for being indifferent to nature protection issues. Wish everyone great fruitful work and new victories. With great respect, the chair and the goodwill envoy at UN, Mr. Fetisov, the chair of the Committee on Nature Protection. Thank you, Dmitry. Now, greetings from the Committee on Nature Use and Environment Protection of the Government of St. Petersburg, the chair of the committee, Mr. Alexander German.
Спасибо. Добрый день, уважаемые.
Good day, dear colleagues, dear friends. We are happy to greet everyone in St. Petersburg at EXPOFORUM. Thanks for coming here, responding to our invitation. Pandemic is over. Now we are beginning the revival. Europe got separated, but we can do without them. Ecology requires a lot of activities. So at all the previous years in forums, we said that ecology is no boundaries. We've invited our European colleagues. It's a pity they did not come. So we're doing well with our regions, with our colleagues from Asia. And today at the Baltic Sea Day, it was mentioned we had Vietnam, Myanmar, and other countries present. Let me add, personally, it was correctly mentioned by Mr. Ivan Serebritsky that the Council of Federation played a very important role, like modification of the water code took 3 years, but thanks to the senators of St. Petersburg at the Federation Council, we managed to do this work. The package of documents is already at the Duma Parliament. Thus, the water code shall be modified the way we want it. I believe that the present forum shall cause many discussions, useful meetings. So I wish everybody fruitful and successful work. Thank you.
Спасибо, Александр Викторович.
Thank you, Alexander.
Не могу не отметить отдельно.
I should separately note
Во всем должно быть все прекрасно.
that, well, everything should be fine, and for us to have a fine mood, we need art. Mood is supported by art. Just before the beginning of our forum, the committee was addressed by Olga Komova, the general director of the State Academic Capella of St. Petersburg, Singers Society of St. Petersburg. She explained the role of art in ecology and ecology enlightenment. Good day. Yeah, seems surprising. 20 years ago, certain problems were mentioned related to the big city, but now the agenda has become much bigger. And it was mentioned that the challenges of the big city make us look for conventional solutions of ecological problems. Capella is a historical building downtown. Through its yards, one can get to the main square, Palace Square, and to the main streets of St. Petersburg. It's a big, noisy, busy city, but big city needs special locations, quiet places with music and nice architecture. In big cities, they create more and more small and pretty areas where one can sit under the tree and read the book. Thus, Capella Yards stopped being just a shortcut. Several years ago, supported by the Committee on Culture of St. Petersburg, we've created a project called Art Courts of Capella, where music sounds, where one may not simply read a book, but hear lovely music. There's the fan zone of Tchaikovsky contest, and one can hear the music of great composers. There's also Rachmaninoff here being celebrated in our country, and globally, Rachmaninoff music may also be heard at Capella courtyards. Now, art yards are being created with special art projects. All of a sudden, in the center of St. Petersburg, people find themselves in quite a creative area. Thus, the big city changes its image and shows its art courtyards are the way to the museum, theater. You're welcome to enjoy our works of art. Thus, you won't sense too stressed in a big city.
It's important that when we set up this program together with the City Amelioration Committee of St. Petersburg, we signed an agreement. I mean, the Amelioration Committee and the Capella Music Hall. We decided to set up the Landscape Music Initiative, where at small locations, small parks, music will be played, creating this special mood. I believe that will be a new developmental vector. It's part of the big city environment ecology. Why? Because culture and ecology are intertwined. Even there is this notion of cultural ecology, and vice versa. The culture is promoted in ecology because tourists are attracted into cities, and we must promote these locations. And St. Petersburg is no different from other major cities. We discussed these avenues with Novosibirsk, Krasnoyarsk. They are big cities, but not cultural capitals. But however, they are examples of vivid cultural life. We invite you into Capella Music Hall, and I assure you that you will be immersed into this cultural and environmentally friendly atmosphere. Thank you. Thank you, Olga Sergeyevna. That's a new idea and beautiful at the same time. We have NGO representatives in the audience. I think your initiative will be picked up. Colleagues, with this, the first part of the plenary, welcome addresses, is finished. Let us get down to business. That's why we come together today. So the main idea of this year plenary session is water bodies and water resources and digital transformation when it comes to water management. These are avenues that are actively developed in today's environmental agenda. We will start with a pure novelty. Here I mean the adaptation to climate changes. The draft of this agenda was made. At that time, we did know that Prime Minister Mishustin on March the 11th will sign the governmental decree related to objectives and tasks of the second national stage in adaptation to climate changes. We invited to attend this session the representative of Competitiveness and Environment Department of the Ministry of Natural Resources, Kamila Ramilevna Elbendirova. Are you with us, Kamila?
Здравствуйте.
Can you hear me all right? Yes. Hello.
Итоги реализации первой
The results of implementing the first stage of the National Adaptation Plan to Climate Change and objectives and targets of the second stage. In 2022, the National Adaptation Plan to Climate Change was finished. It was adopted by the governmental decree December the 25th of 2019. The plan was developed and prepared and focused to setting up the adaptation system to climate change. It included national, industry branches and regional plans, as well as the methodology and base. So the first stage of the National Adaptation Plan was finished. So the Ministry of Economic Development of Russia published a decree number 267. The methodology was approved, and as well as the adaptation indicators. The unified methodological base for assessing climate risks, the ranking of measures to adapt to the risks, and the development adaptation measures at different levels. That was the content of the document. The Natural Resource Ministry then approved all these measures on May 2021 as guidelines. And then the federal bodies approved adaptation plans in 10 weather-dependent and climate-dependent economy branches. The executor bodies of the Russian Federation prepared regional adaptation plans. So that's the hierarchy. As of March the 10th, 2023, the plans are approved at 52 Russian constituencies. We believe that, and we hope that other constituencies will catch up soon. The adaptation measures to climate change were included into regional strategic planning. The norm setting and regulation must be approved. The executive bodies adopted the federal law on general principles of organization, and the Russian constituencies now have the authority to participate in events on adaptation measures. Rosgidromet may achieve a great volume of works, and the third assessment climate change report was published and approved. It had the assessment of various adaptation scenarios. The first adaptation stage was complete, and the Ministry of Natural Resources prepared, as it was said, the second adaptation stage based on the results of the first stage and it was approved by the Russian government March the 11th. The new plan has 17 items based on federal, regional, and industry segments. Everything is looked into, including methodology and information circulation. Methodology guidelines on assessing possible damage, assessment of climate threats across different industry segments in the Russian Federation, methodology on assessing efficiency and effectiveness of adaptation measures, and methodological guidelines on studying the adaptation to the climate change as to be included at different levels of norm-setting documents. Improving insurance mechanisms as part of the adaptation risks of natural calamities, making a list of the best international and Russian practices, and setting new technological solutions that are part of adaptation mechanisms. We must control environmental risks in a systemic way, and it is planned to have a list of measured data, including spacecrafts that provide this data. Climate change scenarios are developed for the Russian territory. They will cover different parameters and different scenario subtypes. Once it's done, the approved regional and industrial adaptation plans will be updated. We see a big chunk of work when it comes to monitoring in the Russian Federation. We plan to run a review and provide suggestions for technical regulations. All in all, the Ministry of Economic Development continues to prepare the country to adapt to climate changes, considering possible impacts on social issues, economy, and people well-being. Thank you.
Спасибо, Камиля Равильевна.
Thank you very much, Kamila Ravilievna. We move on along the agenda. So we are in year 2023. The implementation of national projects is planned at 2024. That's a massive program ongoing across multiple Russian regions. St. Petersburg is known as Venice of the North. Therefore, for us, national projects are especially important for water bodies and water resources. I would like to invite the Agency of Water Resources at Nevsky Ladezhsky Department. Maria, what is your take on this topic? Good afternoon, colleagues.
Кратко.
Briefly, across federal projects, let me start by saying that Russia has over 2 million small and mid and big rivers and hundreds of thousands of other water bodies. Russia is #1 country. Russia is country #1 globally in fresh water reserves. Water bodies, that's the foundation of human life, and therefore they must be first and foremost preserved. And in fact, that is the key principle, the foundation of Russian water regulations and code. The principles of water management, and the president published a decree on national development goals by 2030 to assure a comfortable and safe environment for humans and achieving the goal of eliminating the accumulated hazards and that covers the damage on the Volga River, the Baikal Lake, etc. So the ministry runs two federal projects, therefore, for recovery of the Volga River and for preservation of unique water bodies.
Федерального проекта
The federal program on federal project on the Volga River recovery includes 8 federal agencies: the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of Construction, the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Education and Research, Russian water bodies, Russian nature oversight, and Russian fishery. So 24 water transmission installations at Volgograd regions were launched as part of the project, and 13 among them were launched ahead of time. Yerik, Sukhadol, Yerik, Shulyashka, and Kletsky saw the finished waterworks at Volga-Aktubinsky region. So cleaning of channels, Karaysky, Belinsky, Kirovsky at Astrakhan region were finished with the total length of 77 kilometers. Construction and reconstruction of 24 wastewater treatment facility across 11 Russian constituencies. I'm talking about utility services with a total capacity of 0.28 cubic kilometers per annum. The largest installation launched in 2022 was the second unit of Novokuryanovsk wastewater treatment facility at Moscow.
в рамках федерального
Now the federal project preservation of unique water bodies. In 2022, Russian constituents finished such activities as cleaning of 5 water bodies with the total length of 98 kilometers across 4 Russian constituencies: Rostov region, Moscow region, 2 facilities at Kaliningrad region, and 1 at Mordovia Republic. In summary, by the end of 2022, 11 items were implemented when it comes to rehabilitation, water body rehabilitation. Over 130 nature protection activities were complete, cleaning with the total space of 16,000 square kilometers, cleaning of riverbeds with the length of over 300 kilometers. It improved the living conditions of people living next to water bodies, the total amount of people, 12.5 million. Ministry of Construction in Russia implemented a number of infrastructure facilities to reduce the negative impacts on Teletskaya Lake. We're talking about the Altai Republic. Sewage and wastewater treatment facilities and water supply network were installed. People participated in environmental projects, cleaning the banks of rivers and protection of forests. This avenue is one of specific features in the project, and the success is achieved by the direct contribution of this country's citizens. Water of Russia is an annual project. Over 800,000 volunteers participate in year 22. Over 21,000 events were organized, cleaning of litter from banks and shores. The total amount of people who participated was 1.3 million.
В 2023
Year 2023,
ресурсов
the Russian Water Resources Agencies, as part of the Volga River Recovery Federal Project, has a plan to clean up at least 58 kilometers of water bodies at the lower Volga, to introduce 5 water transfer facilities, 1 at Astrakhan and 4 at Volgograd regions. So project participants across 4 Russian constituencies plan to construct and upgrade 44 wastewater treatment facilities. 23 out of them are to be complete this year, 2023.
обеспечить расчистку и дно
The project assures the dredging and cleaning of over 24 kilometers of canals used by fish at the lower Volga. That ensures spawning of fish. The total area over 400 hectares. The Ministry of Russian Ministry of Nature plans for objects for removing the accumulated damage across 4 regions. Federal projects preserving of unique water bodies, 2022, 40 constituencies in the Russian Federation will have 57 events for cleaning of water bodies. 60.4 kilometers of riverbeds are to be cleaned up. By the end of year 23, the total cleaned riverbeds will be over 412 kilometers. The departments in this agency planned 45 events to be done. 3,000 hectares of water bodies are to be cleaned. By the end of 2023, the total capacity of restored water bodies will be 17,300 hectares. The cleaning of Chutska-Pskovsky Lake closer to settlements is to start. We talk about Gdovsky region. And across all Russian consistencies, it is planned to clean from litter river banks and water body banks. At least 8,000 people are to participate.
Это кратко о итогах,
So
что проделано в рамках
that's in brief what was done within the framework of federal projects. And these projects are going to be finished in the year 24. Since the year 25, they should start new federal projects for improvement of the water areas. Hence, we needed to prepare suggestions regarding a number of activities
наибольшее
so
количество
that we can involve the
приятных территориях.
so that maximum more people live in environmentally friendly places. We enjoy the support, and in his message to the Federal Council, our President, Mr. Putin, mentioned that we should continue the improvement of unique water areas like Baikal and Volga, and rivers like Don, Kama, Irtysh, Ural, and Terek. He also named Volkhova, Neva, and Ilmen Lake. He also mentioned smaller rivers of Russia. They shouldn't be forgotten as well. Hence, we need to develop the suggestions for new federal projects. Thank you.
Спасибо, Марина Викторовна.
Thank you, Marina. We understand we have a lot of work to do, but we're happy about it. We like this attitude to preservation of water areas in St. Petersburg. That's really inspiring. We are actively working in this field already, and the Ministry of Water Resources is supporting us actively. We have even the a written testimony of that. Yeah, things should be done same like at Volga River simultaneously. Many places, same approach should be used. That will enable us to really resolve the problem.
Водный ресурс.
Water resources are of vital importance, but energy security is also of great importance, and it impacts the environment quite strongly. How will the energy system of the country shall develop under sanctions? Natalia Zakalova, the head of the Union of Energy and Ecological Security, shall tell us about that. Thank you, dear colleagues. Thanks for the invitation. Let me begin with figures. You can't argue figures. Here you can see the consumption of primary energy since the year 15 till 21. Production of electricity and heat is the main input. That makes 27%. A bit less, 28% it was in the year 15, now it's 27. Second comes transport. Next comes mining industry and utilities. Some 8 million tons of conditional fuel was used since the years 15 till 21. There you can see the energy consumption of GDP. It went down nearly by 0.3, but in general, the consumption is pretty stable. And now we see that besides what was named, there's also the processing industry that requires that. Now, greenhouse gas emissions. Fuel is the leader. It's not CO2 only, it's also methane. We see that nearly 78% is the input of the energy complex. Second comes industry, agriculture, and waste. Quite abruptly, since the year 90 till 95, there was a decline of GHG emissions, but that's due to reduction of productions, not to new technologies.
Снабжение тоже уменьшилось.
Even the population went down since the year 90. We keep talking about strategic documents, and an important document for ecology security is the one that determines the strategy till the year 50. By 70%, the GHG has to be reduced. By the year 60, according to the President Putin, Russia has to become carbon neutral. Gray on slide is the amount of emissions of equivalent of CO2. Green is the saturation level, absorption level, and gray is the necessary level. Disregarding the sanctions, Russia continues to have the intensive, not the inertial scenario of its development, and we are striving for carbon neutrality. Well, companies and energy companies play an important role in this program. Completely in line with what was mentioned, there are 4 companies. They're ready to become carbon neutral. That's Tatneft, EN+, X5 Retail Group, and S7 Airlines. There's another number of companies that announce a serious cutting down of emissions by the year 30. That's Rosneft. By the year 35, by 30%, they're planning to cut down. There are also similar parameters in Rosal and smaller parameters in Novatek and Interau companies. Well, all the sanctions have limited the import of technologies and equipment for treatment of gases and of waste that may cause problems in attaining the goals mentioned by the colleagues. Hence, it's very topical that before the year 30, there works the Federal Scientific Technical Program, or FENTP. We believe that the main mission of this FENTP program is using the high adaptation prospects of or abilities of our ecosystems, of groups of industries, and also we should do the R&D and do the import substitution. Now the companies experience the shortage of filters necessary for processing of gases. We should also provide the green transition, not only via the raw materials, but also utilities and metal production. Well, utilities sector, for example, it's not only the mining and processing enterprises that cause GHG emissions, but so does the population using, say, inefficient boilers, burning coal for fuel. Now we have already 41 instead of 12 cities with clean air, but there are efficient boilers that use coal still emit less GHG than when working on the other kinds of non-solid fuel. All this exists. Now they discuss modification of the Order 1600, and they'll provide subsidies for the regions for procurement by population of such energy-efficient boilers. Otherwise, it's a problem. Many have heard about the black sky in the city of Krasnoyarsk, but the main fault for that is not enterprises but population. Sometimes they're too poor. That's why they're using the old equipment. Next, agriculture was mentioned. How reforms in agriculture may improve the situation. Since the 1st of March, law number 248 came into force on the animal husbandry byproducts. Remember, they wanted to ban beef because cows produce a lot of methane. Some funny initiatives when farmers are being fined if they're growing cattle, but not plants or insects if they grow cattle. Thanks God, in Russia, animal husbandry continues to develop. And we should say that climate goals and energy and ecology goals, they're all important. We should stick to nature protection, but not at any price. We should continue the economic improvement. If some solutions are not very popular, they should be subsidized. So this law came into force since the 1st of March, and I hope that animal husbandry waste disposal shall get new development, and manure will not be simply used in the fields, but will be recycled in a necessary way. Tomorrow we'll have a profile roundtable on water resources and energy safety. So at 10 in the morning, I invite everybody to the hall number B2. Thank you for the attention. Thank you, Natalia.
Спасибо, Наталья Романовна. И в развитии
Now,
этой темы
to develop this topic, by the way, Natalia, on your slides, I didn't see a well-known Russian company mentioned. Now we'll hear from them. What's the climate strategy of Gazprom company? It wasn't mentioned, right? That is why I now give the floor to the deputy head of a department of Gazprom on the issue, the doctor of chemical sciences, Mr. Alexander Ishkov.
Газпром далек
Gazprom is
виртуальная
far from making such PR announcements. How can S7 be neutral? Their airplanes will keep using fuel, not manure, I guess. So one shouldn't speak too much. One should do better.
природный газ,
Natural gas,
историю его использования,
throughout the history of its usage globally, and in Russia in particular, enabled to the development of big cities. Imagine what would happen if Moscow or St. Petersburg were still fueled by coal. They wouldn't get development like nowadays. We know that from the history of foreign cities like London. Life became impossible before they switched to the other energy resources. So gas enabled the big cities to develop, and in future,
отношения это основное средство
well,
сейчас реально экономически.
now let me tell you about the realistic means that may be used to improve the environment. On my first slide,
Как вот те компании наших
there are many speculations about other companies from the ex-friendly countries. They seem to be very environment friendly in comparison with us, but specific emissions of greenhouse gas, the so-called carbon footprint of the global companies, that the amount of CO2 in grams per 1 megajoule of energy. See where's Gazprom and where are the other ZIF environment-friendly companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, etc. So at present, Gazprom Group has the least emissions among the biggest oil and gas companies.
больше доли природного газа. Но вот слева
Due to the fact that we have a bigger share of natural gas among the products we sell. In the past decade, energy, the share of natural gas grew in general, and this enabled to avoid some the emission of some 300,000 billion tons of CO2. There's the input of other countries as well, but of Russia too. Decarbonization is a well-known word nowadays, but what are the realistic methods for bringing down of CO2 emissions and of other greenhouse gases? We can expand this share in, I'll say, utilities and at transport as well. The development and rescue of big cities took place due to the usage of natural gas that replaced coal in energy sector when the share of transport was minimal in the cities. Now transport is prevailing in cities. In Moscow, it's over 90%. In St. Petersburg, it's a bit over 80%. I mean, the share in emissions. That's why if we transfer all the transport to natural gas for fuel, that'll enable us to achieve the necessary result in big cities like in St. Petersburg. The level of gasification is over 95%. Hence, the environment is much better in St. Petersburg than in the other Russian cities, to say nothing of Asia. Well, there's one more
В смысле легенда, да?
legend
Общее место в том, что перевод на
or general info saying that if we switch to electric vehicles, so that will improve decarbonization. Here is the data on carbon footprint of different kinds of transport vehicles in Russia. Underline in Russia. If we use BEVs and consider all the carbon footprint, the production, the operation, etc., the disposal, well, the batteries with the diesel heating, like electric buses that are perceived as the most environment friendly. However, their carbon footprint is rather big. There are also the hydrogen fuel elements. Everyone believes they're absolutely environment friendly, but see how much energy is necessary for obtaining of hydrogen. So that's all. Now the compressed gas. If we switch to gas from petrol and diesel fuel, well,
с точки зрения общих углеродного следа практически не отличаются.
we have same footprint as the BEVs. The figures are 160 and 167. But if we think about the economy of the issue, of course, the electric vehicle is much more expensive than the one using natural gas for fuel. On this slide, you see that the consumers and cities where people do count money when selecting the kind of transport, switching to compressed natural gas brings down the operation expenses of the consumers. They cut down in comparison with the using the petrol of brand 90 say in trucks by 12 rubles per kilometer is the amount of savings. If we talk about big trucks with diesel engines, here is the calculation. One may save 118,000 rubles monthly thanks to switching to gas for fuel. So when selecting a strategy, unless you're extremely rich, if it's budget money that needs to be saved, it's better to use natural gas. To the right, you see a kind of advertising. The annual load of contaminating substances per citizen of St. Petersburg in gram per person. It's roughly 70 kilos per person, but if 50% of transport of St. Petersburg is switched to compressed natural gas, it'll go down twofold and be just 35 kilos per person.
So that's as far as contamination substances hazardous for the health.
Ну, теперь, собственно,
Now, coming back to the sustainable development scenarios developed by the Economic University of St. Petersburg. These scenarios were tested by the Academy of Russian Science. This is the developmental forecast, the review of the adaptation strategy already mentioned today, and low carbon development, whether it's possible without any economical impact. Principles are present on the slide. Digit-wise, we plan to reduce that this is by weight, but unit weight ratio when we consider both extraction and sale. And therefore, the unit emission by 2033 will be decreased by 12% for gas business and by 9% by electric business. It sounded like energy segment is at fault. Not really. This is the research data. Together with the Academy of Russian Science, we published this paper at the end of 2022. The methane and climatic change, research challenges and technological aspects. That's to the left. And to the right of the slide, there is a quote translated from the report, from the relevant presentation of researchers.
Сейчас говорят не очень.
To put it mildly, the countries that are not really friendly to us, the researchers from those countries. However, in conclusions, they were to recognize that Siberian gas-filled methane is excluded from the list for possible reasons why methane concentrations grow in the atmosphere. That's an isotope-based research. The methodology is quite complicated. However, now we have the arguments proving that methane from Siberian gas oil fields are not at fault. And leading researchers from global universities from different countries participated. Over half of anthropogenic emissions are due to agriculture, growing of rice, cattle breeding, etc. We know that political changes happening around us resulted in a situation when Russian gas, due to different reasons, is no longer in demand. At the same time, similar volumes, and probably this volume will grow, this gas is substituted by the American shale gas. According to national cadastres, not according to Russian research, I underline, submitted to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, methane emitted at gas extraction at the USA 18 times higher than in Russia. Therefore, gas currently delivered to Europe from the United States is by 30 times energy more dependent than gas produced in Russia. So legends are still circulating that our energy segment impacted the way we reach climate goals in the EU. Now the situation pushes them to restart coal generation. Over 6 years, Gazprom center operates in St. Petersburg. It became our headquarter city. And this year, the leading research center of Gazprom moves to St. Petersburg. Over 2,500 staff employees will be relocated to St. Petersburg, and they are ready to continue to work for the benefit of the city, and they will be engaged in environment projects. Thank you.
Спасибо, Александр. Очень интересный доклад.
Thank you very much, Alexander Gavrilovich. Your presentation was wide and interesting. That's interesting that St. Petersburg can use the research base of Gazprom. Since 2008, there was a massive program implemented in St. Petersburg of moving boiler houses from coal to gas, to the use of gas. And we just have 8.1 facilities that generate heat and power that still use coal and mazout. And our governor Biglov last month communicated with President Putin and received an instruction that by year 2025, the city must get rid of these generating capacities using fuel and coal, mazout and coal. We understand that emissions are generated when mazout, heavy fuel oil, and coal are fired. But the city wants to upgrade to a better standard. I think we are leaders in this respect in Russia. Is it correct? Yes. We are moving on, and we'll speak about the role of public when it comes to environmental agenda. Non-governmental segment as an active participants in implementing state projects. And I would like to invite the chairperson of the Russian NGO on protection and natural resources, Russian Environmental Society. Thank you very much for your invitation to participate. That's already a brand in the industry, and I feel like at home here. You are 22 years old, I mean, as event. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Ismailov Rashid. Let me come back to the agenda that was introduced by the head of the Industry Committee from our upper parliamentary chamber. Of course, I will speak about my society, but let me begin by saying trust is of paramount importance. The time is such that we feel the deficit of trust between the society and the power, the corporate segment and the government. Trust is absolutely necessary for efficient communications and links. And the efficient implementation of a state policy is impossible without societal trust. When people mistrust government, we see funds are spent on national projects named environment, ecology. So we, as citizens and society in general, must trust our government and businesses. I am to offer 4 recommendations, and I would like them to be part of our summary document for the forum. So here are my recommendations. First, it is addressed to regional management teams at governor offices, at branch managerial teams that work to implement industrial policies. So go out of your comfort zone and invite external experts. We do need expertise. I know we have many ministers present in the audience. So leave your comfort zone. That's my call to you. And invite external experts. In fact, don't be afraid. It is a support when you are assessed and get the external point of view. Then it is easier to upgrade your managerial solutions. If you feel vulnerable and do not wish to open at large, then set up focus groups or provide platforms where your draft managerial projects can be tested. This is extremely useful. Our practice testifies to that. The Russian Environmental Society, my organization, has chapters at 70 constituencies in Russia. And if you follow my agenda and my society agenda, we also had 9 platforms associated with governors, I mean public platforms associated with different governors' offices. So we truly underline that expert support is a way forward. There is a lot of environmental oversight. Indeed, there are many watchdogs and control bodies. So you will agree with me. But when it comes to aiding our officials, then there are not so many organizations. Practice showed that civil servants, they do change. My second recommendation is addressed to the corporate segment. Open up. Well, we do have haters and blackmailing bloggers. If you are not willing to disclose your information, there will be many others willing to disclose information, and it will be an unpleasant surprise to you. So set up channels for direct communications. Do not limit your communications to kind of void press releases, just giving dry information that is unclear to people. It is not disclosing, it's not providing information. You get an opposite effect. People mistrust you. So this will be your risk management, my second recommendation. The third recommendation to any level civil servant, be it federal, regional.
Решите что-нибудь с объяснительным языком.
Do something when it comes to explanations. We have a real lack of explanations. We are not able to explain the norm, the technological or managerial solution. Our civil servants do still speak their professional jargon, and regular people don't understand what they mean by implementing policies or achieving targets. There are complicated presentations, percentages, and it fogs out the philosophy and key principles of major projects, even the National Environmental Project. Another thing is the breakdown of communication chains or links. We do not have a common language, therefore we misunderstand, mistrust, and mistrust leads to political risks. My fourth recommendation is to norm setters, to legislative bodies. Bloggers must be having higher responsibility. Here I'm in anonymous channels. They published unverified information of fakes, create fakes. We must do something about these bloggers as a great informational threat. I call myself a professional, so we as professionals in this field, we cannot judge whether this is trustworthy information or not. Fakes are difficult to distinguish. However, experts say that about 60% of everything we see in terms of information in our news line, it means that it is fake and with the purpose to impact public opinion. And many use this leverage. And there are examples when respected people of status and high standard, they are publishing untrustworthy information at their public pages and Telegram channels. So we have to do something about it. Here are my 4 recommendations, and I do want them to be part of our summary document. Probably I will bring you the text. So far, I just made it verbal. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rashid Adinovich. A small comment to your speech. You are a frequent guest with us, and you know that the big city ecology event for the second time will run a workshop on how to work with mass media when it comes to environmental agenda. So 2 years ago, it was not that pressing, and this tool wasn't frequently used as a pressing instrument towards Russia. And it becomes evident today that using ecology as an excuse, you may call against you may call participants to take part in anti-governmental actions. So your proposals can be sent to the steering committee. So with this, we finished the second virtual part of our plenary session. We could have called it the federal or general agenda. With this, we're moving to the third part, and it includes the opinion of Russian constituencies, because this is our audience. I will start probably with my region and give the floor to the head of the Nature Use Committee, Alexander German, with the presentation on the environmental agenda development in St. Petersburg. Thank you. Yes, you work in the field of environment. Therefore, we come across fakes quite often, and very often these are fantasies or dreams of certain people who quickly make these posts, and advanced users would keep promoting. For example, garbage plants. That's a hot topic. St. Petersburg has the general concept, together with Leningrad Oblast, how to process, recycle garbage. We plan to have 3 waste handling facilities. And the last year showed a great number of Telegram canal groups and other mass media platforms. They exchange information. There is the organizer who coordinates the activities. Well, we see the script behind it. So fighting such manipulations is high at our agenda because it's important. But that was a side remark. Let me come back to my dear St. Petersburg and what we do in terms of environmental agenda. Environmental protection and environmental safety is a key on the agenda. In the Federal Assembly address, President Putin especially focused on environmental agenda. St. Petersburg work in this field systemically.
Since the year 2022, they started the reform of solid waste processing, and new operator was taken. We now remove it. You remember that year as beginning when we were criticized since we couldn't organize a waste disposal. Remember, January, February of the year 22 were rather difficult for us, but by the time of March, we managed. By the end of the year 22, everything was fine. In the year 23, we still have a group of tasks to resolve in waste disposal. In the year 22, we measured how much waste is accumulated according to the statement of the Russian Federation. And throughout 4 seasons, for 7 days, we measured the amount of different waste, its kind, volumes. Now we are processing this information statistically, and thus will create new norms. The old ones were made yet in the year 17, and de facto we see that the factor differs from the norms. In some kinds, it's less waste. In some kinds of waste are more plentiful. Payment depends on that. I mean, the services for removal of solid waste. Of course, we may be criticized by the population because since in comparison with the year 22, the prices for removal of waste went up. That was related to the investment program for the plants for waste incineration. The first plant that was put into operation, that was December 22 at Volkhonka. The first 200,000 tons shall be processed by that plant. Next, we are planning to continue this success. Next is a unique system that we've created for collection of hazardous waste. You know that since the year 22, the federal environmental operator has to be dealing with the hazardous waste of class 1 and 2. Unfortunately, the federal environmental operator is only working with companies, not with population, but individuals form a lot of hazardous waste, like accumulators, tires, overdue drugs, etc., with expired shelf life. So in the year 22, we started dealing with the problem. We have 10 environment sites. The number shall grow to 18. This year, we also have 2 eco cars driving across St. Petersburg, and 480 environmental terminals where accumulators may be dumped, or the lamps containing mercury. Thus, we've collected 170 tons of hazardous waste. Mainly, those are batteries, tires as well. 3% is made by drugs, but now, however, we've collected some 3 tons. 1 pill only weighs 2 grams. No wonder. So we've collected 3 tons of drugs. We'll continue developing. In the year 24, we expect the number of 23 terminals. The number of terminals for collection of hazardous waste shall keep growing in the future years. One more mentioned by the President of Russia, that is a removal of polygons with accumulated hazardous waste. We have 6 of those in St. Petersburg. One is by Shuchi Lake in Komarova settlement. If you're locals, you know where is that. The federal funding came for that, and we are now organizing a tender for removal of that old dump. Another big old dump is Primorskaya, a dump at the crossing of Mebelna and Telegraph-Mashevskaya Street. That's some 10 hectares of waste over there, quite a big project, so a lot has to be done about it. It'll take us some 3 years. Next, we'll deal with the other old dumps we need to take care of. Development of reserves. You've mentioned that we have 17 reserves in St. Petersburg. Total area is over 19,000 hectares. That's Levashovsky Park, 3,500 hectares. And in future, there will be several more areas that shall be announced to be protected areas. Sestroresk Dunes, Darkhovka, and other places. Now, the protection of water areas. This was also mentioned by President Putin. We're paying special attention to this topic, and everything related to treatment and cleaning and improvement of the water reservoirs. We're doing that. We also clean the bottom from the sediments. So we want to preserve our Baltic system, and we've signed an agreement on that today. We were promoting this process, yet in September of the previous year, we had a meeting at Smolny with our colleagues. We discussed our work in this area. After that, we've applied to the Federal Agency of Water Resources, and thanks God, the President mentioned rivers Neva, Volkhov, and Ilmen. They need to be preserved. Thus, today the agreement was signed. Next, we'll develop the national project. Hopefully, everything will work fine by the year 25. Working with social networks, that's one of the issues mentioned by Rashid Tagirovich. Well, if we care for environment, that'll improve everyone's life, improve economy, and thus will impact positively on the environment. One can't imagine resolving environmental problems without involvement of mass media. Nowadays, the information is disseminated at a very high speed, and it's not only TV, radio, and printed editions. Everyone has access to internet nowadays. Info access is always at hand, right in our mobile phone. Sure, you're checking. Some of you are checking YouTube or Telegram or WhatsApp right now. Well,
Ну, скажем так, у нас занимает
people do communicate via mobile phone. Children say overuse it. They never part with their smartphones. My younger daughter, I keep taking mobile phone away from her. She keeps corresponding with her mates all the time. Too much of it. Sometimes I'm ashamed to see what they write to each other. For efficient cooperation, socialization with the audience, one shouldn't just present the reports. Social networks should be involved. If you're present in internet media, you get new audience, new readers. One should think about new opportunities and formats, not just bringing the info, but involving a discussion, cause some activities. We also need to cooperate with public opinion leaders, the so-called POLs. Well, due to the sanctions, now ideology is involved. One has to be very fast when working it. Sometimes bureaucrats are box-minded. When I came from the Committee of Property, everything was simple. This is the size of the area, order number, this and that. That's it. The work was very simple.
скажем, поля.
But now that I'm dealing with ecology and nature protection, now that I'm socializing with the civil society, I would say work is more difficult. Say in Order 38, there's item 2 saying that everything necessary has been done. We're trying to be formal but informal at the same time. Thus, we've created the Science and Technology Councils with experts that help us in resolving of our problems. One of the main problems in St. Petersburg is the blue algae. Some say chlorella will be a rescue, say it will make the situation worse. So the discussion started. It's good to watch the discussion, but on the other hand, we can't just listen endlessly. We have to do something about the mentioned algae. Some are good in lobbying, some are less good. But who will tell what's the best method, chlorella or not? Thanks to my colleagues in the committee. Thus, we should do an experiment with water reservoirs with blue-green algae. With one, we'll involve the chlorella. In the other, ultrasound. In the third, we'll do nothing. And we'll see where it works best. Some time is necessary for that. But that's the feature of an experiment. Otherwise, the blue-green algae or cyanophyta will be bad to us. In one of our channels, while it was freezing in St. Petersburg, water was green near the engineering castle, quite downtown. The blue-green algae is modifying, and it may continue living at temperatures close to freezing. These are the main principles of work with mass media. Yes, the info should be checked, agenda should be diverse. Here are our contacts. We're in Contakte and in Telegram channels. We always respond, place information. You've seen the statistics on our cooperation with local TV. We pay great attention to that. Everything happens, something happens daily. Yesterday, on the 20th of March, we've let the birds fly in the sky. On the Day of the Earth, mass media and ornithologists were invited to see that. It looked very nice. The bird is alive. People are happy. Biodiversity is provided. Thank you for the attention.
Можно одну ремарку короткую?
Да.
One remark, brief one, if I may. I've now signed up for the Telegram canal. I think something has to be done about it. There are 726 subscribers from all of St. Petersburg. I believe those in this audience should support the committee because we need a larger scale. Unfortunately, if it's gossip, everybody is interested to read it, but what about the positive information? It is not promoted well enough, so let's join our forces. Thank you very much for the support. No, we're not forcing anyone to subscribe for our Telegram channel. No, we don't do like this. If you're interested, you're welcome. But all the committee employees are subscribed. They are using it to check where the chair is now located. It's for the population. That's the most wanted audience. If they put a like, we understand we're doing something useful for the society. But thank you anyway for your support. Thank you, Rashid. Thank you, Alexander. Now let me ask, well, we're going a bit ahead of the program. Is Moscow connected?
Нас?
Yes, it is. Evgenia. Hello. Nice to see you. Evgenia Simotnikova, Deputy Head of Department of Nature Use and Environment Protection of Moscow. We've now heard about the situation in St. Petersburg, so we now expect your story about Moscow. What about adaptation and digital transformation? The floor is yours. Hello, Ivan Alexandrovich. I'm happy to see and greet the colleagues. It's a professional, and that's why favorite site, Big City Ecology. While my presentation is being uploaded, the special dimensions of the city and the environment are interrelated things. There's definitely a correlation. Big or small cities, management of environment quality is not always effectively done by scaling of good technologies. Things are different in places of different size. Two things to mention is digitalization in the field of ecology and adaptation and improvement of sustainability of the cities in conditions of more frequent, higher frequency of hazardous meteo events. First, about digitalization. Let me tell you. About many info resources of Moscow. Well, we have different methods for counting of greenery, of planting, new software using for automation of control and surveillance, for control of waste disposal, etc. But I'll only mention the most important things. In Moscow, we have the automated info system. That's a system that exists for over 2 decades, and it tells us everything about the environment condition on the basis of the data of eco-monitoring. All the environments are monitored: air in real-time mode. In the past 1.5 years, geology is being monitored to avoid landslips. What does it mean? Every 20 minutes, the system gets over 4,000 measurements in automatic mode. That's millions per year. Data is accumulated and stored for over 20 years. Technologies are well checked. It's primary data processing is automated, and we have good analytical functions. They transform the data into the info that is valid for the users. VIP data or big data. Let me underline something about this resource when talking about digitalization in general and in ecology. The first point is validity of initial data, which is the basis of the info systems. Big data basis creation is not the only goal. It's a lot of money and time. It's only necessary, and it's only valid if all the incoming data is valid and not erroneous. If we talk about the info resources, which are the results of just digitalization of the archive data, or which is the automation of business processes. I mean the resource, say, getting high-quality info about the environment on the basis of measurement, so precision, stability, accuracy, validity is the key task. Automated info systems necessary, but this is the very top of the pyramid of metrology and methodology. It's quite a science-consuming iceberg, I would say. Well, and that's in line with the national project Clean Air, and it's being done in many Russian cities. The second thing to underline is the level of analytics that which is enabled by the system, so that the primary figures are already the useful analytical information. IT is very well developed in Russia nowadays, even in comparison with the global leaders. But when such special fields are being automated, one should be competent about the content of what is being automated. And there's quite a gap in this field. Nowadays, we're developing the analytics of the resources. That is why competent digital partnerships are of importance.
Example, we cooperate with one of the centers in the Russian Federation, and we built up different simulating models of pollutant transfer, so we can make the reverse trajectory, understanding the way these air masses travel. And we understand that the pollutants may get from natural fires areas. Another very important thing, we have to create an automated information system for environment. So the resource must have a usefulness for specific users. In Moscow, there is an alarm system which informs about any increase above the limit of pollutants and about emergencies. The system provides the information to environmental oversight, even when the capacity is really limited. It's a professional range of products, everything for everyone. This resource is actively developed. Users who have a desire to use this system is the public and the trust, as it was already mentioned by Rashid, the public must trust the city authorities. This system is completely open, and we are one of not so many examples in our countries where citizens can enter the system and get parameters on the environment status. Big data is a driver for IT technology development. Six private applications accumulate data from our resource and provide the situation with regard to the environment. So there is a demand, a public demand for such applications. Briefly, on some other avenues being implemented in Moscow. To the left of my slide, automated methods of industrial emission control. So that's due to the federal law. The industries and companies in the first category must have this mandatory monitoring. Therefore, in Moscow, 54 industrial companies are equipped with such sensors and are monitored. So therefore, it allows institutions, and there is a capacity to really implement the state oversight. Another vividly developing area, in fact, all major companies in Moscow, I mean industrial companies, these are in the city we have clean businesses, but outside of the industrial zones we may have violations and breaches of the norms. Therefore, having the infrared, for example, observation, that's a great opportunity for restricted oversight capabilities. I think there are no analogs of automated control of landslide slopes. That's the second area. It's a promising area. We also have the third area, intellectual systems of greeneries monitoring, with several aspects. First, essential aspects. New sensors appear, and we test them. And we see this great potential to support those who are responsible for the greenery and ensuring the actions and overseeing the actions and providing all the necessary tools for the owners, for the granaries, to keep it in shape. So the world experience is used, and we see the world adapts to climate change, and it is possible now to design and to do urban planning with the desired microclimate parameters and having ecosystem services thanks to ameliorated and territories with greeneries. One more thing to mention. The environmental effect of automation and digitalization can be enjoyed by a big city. And by digitizing its environmental system, but also implementing automated systems in other urban systems like urban utilities, transportation, setting up water mirrors reduced by 40% the use of water. So there are specific figures which show the reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Let us think of that, because we need to have tangible results, the big figure results, when we develop all city industries across the board. Moscow became the leader of the ranking when it comes to digital transformation speed. Moscow experienced can be coupled with the development of federal systems. The system for accounting on the listing of negative environmental impact. In fact, it is completely digitized now, this system. Of course, we shall not go overboard and change the natural environment. In Moscow, since year 22, 25 territories got the status of environmentally protected areas. And allow me announce one event at the workshop tomorrow. We will present the action plan for Moscow in terms of climate adaptation. We started this theme after the great heat of summer 2012. The mayor's office started this plan, and measures are developed. Now, experts determined all these sites within the city economy that impact on the frequency of hazardous meteorological events. So we identified them and ranked them, and we ranked climatic phenomena which result is in negative impact on these sites. We calculated the damage of negative climate change. We calculated the cost of correction, and important conclusions were gained. One of them being that it is much more profitable, one magnitude more profitable, to have prevention in place instead of responding to the negative impact. Well, in fact, the adaptation events as related to the unusual heat of 1212 became the starting point, and the list of measures grew with measures implemented at energy segment, at the level of population, and when it comes to greenery planting. My last slide. Though we consider climate change adaptation, decrease of greenhouse gas emission, I keep saying that greenhouse gas emissions, it's not a narrow story, so to say. Regardless of how you treat global warming, and therefore the need to adapt to it. However, the greenhouse gas reduction is a must because it's the most essential. And this is a way to save resources, reduce negative impact, etc. This is one of not so many indicators which points towards the sustainable development. We see the curve for Moscow, and you see the level of greenhouse gas emissions reduces since 2013, thanks to transportation, public transport reform, and we do want to keep this positive trend. It is important that such things are announced at all environmental events. We do have reserves to improve our environment by getting into better shape different segments in the city economy, be it greenery, transportation, low carbon construction, and utilities. So all these strategies are published, the correct words are there, but they function as separate items, and quite often the decisions are made on the spot, whether to move into other fuels, etc. Because of the gap between different policies, we must think locally, considering the specifics. Because people come to big cities to get education and high profits. But if the city is not comfortable and famous for its bad ecology, so the talented pool will leave the city. We have to think forward 20 or even 50 years ahead. And that's exactly how we invest now to make sure that these are correct investments into capital construction. Thank you.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Evgenia Gennadievna. Your presentation was extremely interesting. We're eagerly waiting for tomorrow and the presentation with better details on regional adaptation. My joke question. What about, do you fight against physical pollution of atmospheric air? Well, there was information on this slide. And there is information on our website. In fact, we take responsibility for reducing noise at night, and we practice this reduction. For any city, it's quite an important task to reduce noise at night. So Moscow and St. Petersburg are leaders in this respect. The task is also to reduce night illumination, night lighting of streets. Well, but we have to keep the balance between environment when, let's say, we reduce the street lighting, but we must keep citizens safe. So to strike the right balance is important. So it is both about legislation and practice. We published legislation prohibiting noise during night. And also we installed the deflecting screens to protect citizens from traffic noise, railroad noise, and these are kilometers and kilometers of fences across roads in Moscow. When it comes to this physical impact of noise, we have vast experience accumulated. We are ready to share. Thank you for your serious answer. But I asked jokingly, because when you presented, we heard the noise of alarms of cars passing. And that's about the noise pollution. Colleagues, we will thank the colleague for Moscow presentation. And in fact, we are waiting for their plan to be presented tomorrow on adaptation to climate change. Many heard of this plan, but none saw it. Well, I'm also eagerly waiting to look at it. Our guest from Kaliningrad, the head of the Department of Environment and Environmental Oversight of Kaliningrad Natural Resource Ministry, Anton Timchisko, with the mechanisms of identifying environmental value of greeneries. Anton, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, colleagues and participants of the forum. I'm honored to represent Kaliningrad region at this forum, and I want to share our experience in compensating greenery planting. Compensation of cut down trees is the most important region to keep the greenery level in cities, because we have construction and infrastructural development to keep cities developing. Many other regions similar to Kaliningrad adopted laws on protecting greeneries, and thus regulating the reproduction of greeneries in cities. Many pages of this document covers the compensation mechanisms. There are two ways. First, by paying the compensation value, cost, into the local budget, or to planting greeneries to compensate. When it comes to calculation and imposing this fees, the mechanism has been in use for many years. However, when it comes to replacing through compensation greenery planting, that's a new mechanism, and we didn't have a document. Therefore, the Ministry of Environmental Resources in Kaliningrad, together with the local experts, came up with the concept for the ecological environmental value of trees for greeneries. I will speak about trees. The similar mechanism is available for shrubs, for bushes. Here you see the parameters of the equation to calculate environmental value for trees. The equation is here. It allows to get the figure or the value of environmental validity for trees to be replaced during compensation greenery planting. Parameters are to be described later. Number one is the CO2 absorption potential as an instrument to climate change adaptation. This parameter is the most important for us. It has the ratio, the highest ratio among other coefficients. So the logic, if this tree can absorb about at least 400 kilograms of CO2 over 50 years, that's ratio 1. Between 401 and 700 over 50 years, that's level number 2. The wood density at 12% humidity. Coefficient 1, 2, and 3 are available. The sustainability growing in city. Unsustainable to grow in city, coefficient is 0.1. Middle average is 1, and highly sustainable, another ratio. The height has 3 coefficients. The growth potential awards the city a special coefficient. The decorative value for greeneries, if it's just the species representative, that's the lowest coefficient of 1. High decorative qualities is 3. Invisivity, it's another depreciating coefficient. If you looked into the equation, the invasion coefficient is to be multiplied by the number, the sum of all the parameters. And we did it for purpose using this soft power and prevent distribution of invasive species. And that's quite an example. This is Stockhorn sumac. We don't want them in our city. The entire table is in front of you. Some trees have all coefficients in every column.
And the last column, that's the result of using this and certain scoring of different species from the point of view of the environmental value. Well, birch is low, 9, while beech or elm has higher score. This is used in the rules of replacement when doing replacement planting. At compensation planting, we first of all plant the trees with environmental value of no less than the trees cut, so that new planting is better than the old greenery. This, and also
не допускается.
It's not allowed to use invasive species at planting. The result of the work conducted was the order of the government of Kaliningrad region about determination of environmental value of the species and the rules of planting and greenery. This document is being in use for over 6 months. Some conclusions may be made.
Озеленение, компенсация вырубленных деревьев, она стала
Compensation planting has become more transparent and understandable for all the stakeholders. This document is adopted to improve greenery in the region. First of all, in the cities. Thank you for the attention.
Спасибо.
Thank you, Anton.
И теперь
Now, let me get to a more particular issue. It was mentioned many times that with no production or science, any activity in the field of environment protection is kind of senseless. If you don't understand what you're doing, the results are usually not so good. So for you to understand what's happening, how the environment reacts to your activities, so to get to learn about that, we go in for science. So in the end, I'd like to give the floor to scientists. We'll begin with CGO, All Russia Institute on Geology. 2 years ago, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Ecology of the Russian Federation was about to start the geo-mapping of St. Petersburg. They do the updating of the maps, and some works were planned for the period from the year 22 to 25. But there was a coincidence. Active and indifferent people suggested that the government of St. Petersburg and the Ministry of Natural Resources resolve a problem. No place in Russia has a 3D geological map of what's underground. Experiments of a kind did take place, but no map was made yet. So now let me give the floor to Mr. Nikolai Filipov, the head of the project of the Department of Regional Geology on of the western regions of Russia from Karpinsky Institute. You're welcome.
Добрый день, президиуму, участники.
Good afternoon, dear participants. Ivan has already mentioned a lot about the projects that I'll represent. It's the first public presentation of our first results. In fact, this project was conceived a long time ago in cooperation with our moderator, Serebritsky, some 10 years ago, after we visited Shanghai in China. This is where we've brought the Geo-Atlas of St. Petersburg. After that, we were invited to visit the Shanghai Geology Institute, and there we were shown a 3D model of the geostructure. So if you want to build something, make a drawing, and we'll tell you whether it's okay or not. So we got very enthusiastic, and after some 10 years, we managed to do something. That's thanks to the fact that the Territorial Fund of GeoInfo was created. It included quite a lot of geological wells.
Значит, буквально назад
2 years ago, in Российская газета newspaper, there appeared a publication about our project in St. Petersburg. Well, I'm not sure whether the meeting did take place, but anyway, I believe such problems may be resolved only if you know the geology. And geology is not that simple in the area of St. Petersburg. There did take place some force majeure events. That was the beginning of the project. In big cities, there's a trend to go underground. Everyone understands that sooner or later one will have to do that. There are good examples of Montreal. They have quite an underground town with dimensions nearly as big as the suburbs of St. Petersburg. There are offices, shops, transport hubs, parking lots. That's the example of Munich. Karpats Square with quite a town underground and a huge mall, biggest mall in Europe. A recent example is the city of Stockholm. Those who visited on Silja Line after leaving the ferry, all the transport vehicles went into the 4 or 8 lane tunnel, and 6 kilometers away they would exit the city. And this really saved a lot on air contamination and mitigation of the noise. It's good that they're beginning to think about it. In St. Petersburg, yet in the Soviet time, this was thought about, and in the year 1979, the great project was created. Best companies were dealing with that. That was done in line with the development of the metro. They also wanted to create junctions and underground tunnels along the main street, Nevsky Prospect, and another big street, Kamenostrovsky Prospect. If that had been done by now, there would be many less traffic jams in St. Petersburg nowadays. At present, we're limited in the development of St. Petersburg Underground, besides the development of the metro. It's mainly the parking lots of the malls that are being built and in the houses, underground parking lots. There had been an Orlov tunnel, quite an ambitious project, but again, alas, it was never carried out. Well, when an idea appeared to create new maps, new digital maps, new generation maps of St. Petersburg, I was offered to be the head of that project. So we thought, what shall we draw on the territory of the city? Red squares are the part of the city which is subject to the state geo mapping. What shall we draw on the city surface? Asphalt, man-made sediments, what for? That's not necessary. Then an idea came at Rosnedra. Let's try to do the following. We have the material in the Committee on Nature Use. Let's try to make a 3D model of geostructure. And on the basis of that, it will be possible to do the planning. Moscow hasn't yet started to do that, so we could be an experiment to start the trend. This project was approved, so we're dealing with it. Here, you see what we're doing. Next, you see the two upper sheets that we hope will do for the city in future. Most likely, support letters shall be necessary from the city authorities, but we'll talk about it later. Well, that's the technical and geological task to create, and it includes two items: the forming of the database to make a 3D model and the adjusting of that model. Altogether, in the archive of the Nature Use Committee, there's over 9,000 wells that have been drilled. Altogether, 6,043 wells with over 34,000 layers of geolayers that we are interested in. Density in the center is pretty good. And
белых пятен.
still some white spots are numerous, but if the model shall get the development in future, we'll add more wells and info to it. Geo-legend, a big number of the wells from different years and of different purpose for geologists, engineers, etc. They were all described in different methods, so to unify all that, quite a lot of work was necessary. So we took the serial geological legend, allocated the necessary layers, we drawn geomaps. Altogether, there are 30 geological layers. And those wells, over 6,000 of those, were double-checked in accordance with that legend. That was the info basis for uniting of these layers and for drawing them where they actually are located. Well, I won't describe in detail how we did the calculation for the model. It's our own technology, though rather simple. So the resolution now is 20 by 20 meters. That's quite sufficient. Initial data wasn't that even. Thus, the validity may differ. However, since St. Petersburg is a plain, there's a platform, so the layers are usually horizontal. There are no abrupt folds or falls. The info is pretty reliable. One shouldn't expect big errors. So here are the 30 models or layers. They're presented on the screen now. So that's a space filled under the city. Any line, any surface, any geological section may be obtained from that within half an hour, if necessary, if there's a request. One may be interested in making an underground storage or in where the metro line will go. So we can easily and quickly obtain and assess this information. Here are the horizon. That's the way they are presented. Any of 30 of those may be easily drawn. We have the coordinates of the foundation. I avoid the geological terms since obviously the audience aren't experts in the field. I'm just presenting you the results. And we can draw any surface. And it's clear that when this was done, we did use foreign software or GIS. All that was used for visualization. And the geological result is very well presented and visible. So everything is clear from the point of view of geology. However, there's a problem. What will happen to that software? What if it's switched off tomorrow? What shall we do? So we are now looking for other different methods of visualization so that we can use that. That's the map up to the Quarterly sediments. These are the ancient paleo valleys. They are the main danger at construction. Here is an illustration. You might have forgotten that accident at metro station Ploshchad Mужества when there was no metro line between the two districts for a couple of years. That's that blue square paleo valley. It was known that the metro line is going under it. That's water and sand that often provides a lot of pressure. In Soviet time, there was a number of wells where liquid nitrogen was pumped, so it was all kept frozen. After perestroika, everything was abandoned. They stopped freezing, hence this did happen, this accident. So paleo valleys should be considered at construction. Otherwise, they may cause expensive problems. anything may be constructed if you have such a model. This is the central part of the city, and things that look like the roots of a tooth are paleo valleys. It's better to not build anything above them. Now you can build any 3D section. That's the way it looks like. You may draw wells along any line. If you're planning to put a pipeline or a collector or reservoir underground, you may use that. That's again the central part of the city. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It should be able to rotate, but I don't have. Now it does. So one can see it from every side. It's quite convenient.
Ну и вот я вам сказал, что, собственно говоря, есть опасения по поводу.
So there's a concern about that imported software. We do have Russian developments in the same field, similar to that software in ENG, Federal Institute. They have developed their own system or software. It was made for geologists. It has many colors and probabilities for drawing, so we are using that system at the moment. Now you see our horizons. They are uploaded into the system. We can do quite beautiful drawing in that software. In conclusion, I'd like to present you the following. Remember, there was a discussion where the Gazprom tower should be built. If it was at Ohta, the initially planned place, there the base is at the depth of 150, 160 meters. Then the piles would cost $1 million. At Lahta, the depth is just around 100 meters, so piling was less expensive and less risky as well. There's yet a lot of work to be done. However, some of the results are already provided. Hope will soon start the discussion of the results with the Committee on Nature Use. What has to be continued, what has to be added. I believe some geological data has to be added. There are several underground horizons, and they should be kept well as a reserve source. That's it with my information. Thank you, Nikolai. We'll have a more detailed presentation on the same topic at the session on digital transformation. That's tomorrow morning. And you'll have a chance to ask questions there. Questions are seldom at the plenary, so you'll be able to do that later. In conclusion of today's plenary session, I'd like to give the floor to Andrei Karpov, Commercial Director of ERNOX company from Belarus Republic. Digital Air is the name of his presentation.
I believe it's extremely interesting and timely presentation, setting up high-density monitoring networks to control air quality. So we think of it for the late 5 years, but have no solution. Good evening. Almost it's evening. So it's difficult to be a speaker before lunch and to be the last speaker before the end of the event. I'll be brief, and if you are very much interested in the details, well, come to me personally after the presentation, after the workshop end. I live in St. Petersburg already, but I represent a Belarusian company. So we produce the small dimension air quality monitoring stations. We are not new into the business. Since 2016, we have staff and ensure that entire production cycle from production to warehousing is assured. Our staff is 27 personnel, and we had major customers from Moscow region and from nature reserve use companies. Regions vary a lot in terms of pollution sources, volumes, landscapes, city landscapes. And monitoring systems are at different stages of maturity. Of course, in our capitals, like in St. Petersburg, the situation luckily is better, and also there is no lack of equipment and qualified staff. But across other regions, monitoring of air quality is quite a sensitive issue to be resolved. Already colleagues spoke today about the language. So public must comprehend what we do. Information must be available and open. We have the new digital generation who wish to know what happens here and now. Digitalization will continue increasing, and we must provide a decent answer for that. Do not reinvent the wheel. That's what we think. Look at global trends. So combined monitoring networks are developed. Here I mean the technological nucleus, and it has high-class systems with high accuracy of monitoring. That's the center, but also the kernel. There are mobile labs providing for operations and immediate response to certain situations. But also there are white spots, locations with difficulties to install stationary installation, but we need to have data on the actual situation. The solution class which we represent has many benefits. First, operational. You get actual information. You can have high-density information and linked to locations. Monitoring at small settlements where economically it makes no sense to install expensive stationary locations units. And nature use companies are interested in having automatic control stations calculating emitted volumes, but understanding the distribution pattern. Small dimension stations are quite new, with evident benefits of compactness, financial availability, the installation ease at big cities where land is scarce. However, there are disadvantages. They are impacted by temperature, humidity, pressure, by non-measurable pollutant, and the measurement quality is not so great. We know about these limitations, so my team started the development by studying traditional solutions, and we were geared to think of a quality solution, knowing the limitations of electrical and chemical sensors. In result, we have gas lab analyzers. They consider the concentrations of pollutants according to the register. Of course, it's part of the listing. In this equipment is in the listing of measuring instruments of the Russian Federation. And it can correlate with the top-level analog systems. Our concept is the functionality of a big monitoring station, but in a compact scenario. So there are lots of impacts, but we need accurate data. Otherwise, it will be a source of disinformation rather than information. So we must assure that measuring equipment enjoys good conditions. Therefore, the station casing is insulated, thermally insulated. We have the module of sample treatment, having it at the right temperature to be accepted by sensible sensors. We also have technology how to eliminate the impact of non-measured components. We have 3 baselines, and the mechanism of updating these baselines. Therefore, removing automatically the invalid data remotely. So there is no post-data treatment. All quality data issues are resolved at the machine level, at the gas analyzer. That's a unique experience. Our customers are interested in having good data, but long reliability of the equipment. So we use good parts. The declared life service is 5 years. Service life is 5 years. But you don't need to replace the parts because we continue support. For the 3 years, we implement across Russia in a serial manner this equipment, so we know how to replace parts. Stable power supply. We have uninterrupted power supply units for 12 to 24 hours. The module of data receipt and transfer is protected against loss of power. In fact, outside of big cities, we cannot praise power supplying organizations for the electricity stable quality, for the stable quality of their electricity. In addition to having good equipment, you must run it properly. Otherwise, it will impact the measurements. Therefore, our idea was to have high degree of automation, and therefore dozens of technological parameters are monitored by us automatically, and we can diagnose the equipment status. In most cases, thanks to automation, we see whether the station can be serviced remotely, or when we ride to the station, that's the least desirable scenario, because it means going to another region of Russia, which is no fun. However, we instruct the operator how to assure the good status of the equipment. Service. It's a classical model of 3 levels, nothing new. We sign a separate service addendum with the customer. We can train either the in-house service team of the customer or can provide it as an outsourcing organization. Our experience, the major project using this equipment, as I described, is Moscow region. The region experienced major issues. Why? Because Moscow and Moscow region urbanized intensively regions. Therefore, there are also landfills, waste fields, and they impact the quality. Volokolamsky garbage handling plant was constructed in 2018. Therefore, the system for monitoring was necessary, and we played a part in this project. Currently, about 350 compact monitoring facilities are used in the region, and we continue implementing this project this year. We also work with utilities, with a field, with dumping sites, and we work with heavy industries of metallurgical sector and petrochemistry, oil processing. We offer turnkey solution to Russian customers, providing services when needed. So benefits are evident. Information is the key to holding the world, and we offer high-tech solution, and it is available both for civil agencies, and it assures open and public information available to the public. As was highlighted by previous speakers, I am open to your questions. So we run technical webinars for experts on a permanent basis. And from time to time, we have trips to Minsk, study trips to the production site. The nearest is coming mid-June. And if you or your experts are interested to join the group, we will be happy to host you at Minsk. Thank you. Thank you, Andrei Alexandrovich. Dear friends, our agenda is complete, with just two small announcements left. First, we already touched this question about during our discussion, the final resolution of the summer resolution of the Baltic Sea Day and the ecology of a big city. We unite two resolutions into one. So the draft version is already available at the website. Please read the draft, and any suggestions, corrections are welcome by the end of tomorrow. The steering committee welcomes these suggestions. The address is given, the electronic address. And by the end of day 3, I mean, by the 24th of March, the summary final version of the forum's resolution will be published, posted at the Congress part of the website. And one more thing to mention, just for your information. So in broad strokes today, we attempted to show the topics to be better detailed at roundtables and other conferences as part of the big city ecology agenda. So this is just in a nutshell for conferences and roundtables organized tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. You are invited to attend them, and in a free mode, you will raise your questions, because the plenary session is pretty formal. Thank you very much for your participation. We hope that it was interesting for you, and thanks to our panelists.